India has a set of extremely good laws. The first is the Wildlife Protection Act, which was enacted in 1972, the Forest Conservation Act, which was enacted in 1980, and the Environment Protection Act, which was enacted in 1986. The Wildlife Protection Act is a very stringent law that ensures that every single species listed in the 4 schedules of the Act are protected, and the Forest Department is the agency that is empowered to protect them. The other aspect of the Wildlife Protection Act is that it provides for notification of areas that are rich in wildlife as either sanctuaries, national parks, conservation reserves or community reserves. The third aspect is that the Wildlife Act empowers Forest Department officers and police officers to prosecute wildlife offenders. The Forest Conservation Act, which came about in 1980, prior to that, state governments had the power to release forest lands for developmental projects. That power was taken away, and now under the Forest Conservation Act, it is the central government which approves of a project or rejects it. And only after obtaining approval under the Forest Conservation Act can somebody take up a project within a forest area. So the utility of the Forest Conservation Act is extremely important because it helps prevent indiscriminate release or use of forest land for non-forestry purposes. Environment Protection Act does not give any protection to land, but it does allow for notification of ecologically sensitive areas around sanctuaries and national parks. In fact, the Supreme Court has directed that 10 kilometers around the boundary of a sanctuary or national park, the state governments have to notify it as an ecologically sensitive area. So Environment Protection Act also has a role to play. Conservationists can use these acts in very many different ways. First of all, it's important that every group which is trying to conserve wildlife must have a fair understanding of these things. I am not a lawyer, but I read these laws and understood how these laws are beneficial to protect forests and wildlife. Because without knowing the law in this country, you cannot get involved in a public issue and try to go out and save forests and wildlife. Using these laws, you can actually prevent wildlife crime or a forest offense. For instance, when you're going into a national park, you find a lot of cattle entering a certain area of the national park. First, your understanding of the law will tell you that entry of cattle inside a national park is an offense. And then on you go to the local forest officer and report it, because it is your duty to report an offense when you see it. So the understanding of the law helps you in doing certain things which will be very beneficial to wildlife.